Hello, everyone, and welcome. I will give a couple of seconds as people continue trickling in, but I'm just really excited for today's conversation, and I'm glad that all of you joined us. My name is Nathan Algrim, and if you haven't seen me before, I am the Senior Academic Community Manager at the Good Food Institute. I will pass it over to our featured speakers shortly, but for those of you who may be new to the GFI community, I wanted to share a quick introduction about who we are and what we do. Especially if this is your first time with us, I would encourage you to spend some time exploring our treasure trove of free resources on our website, gfi.org, which includes everything from technical reports to a free online course on the protein transition. So, this is us. The Good Food Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're dedicated to developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We are funded entirely by philanthropy, and our generous donors allow us to work towards a vision in three areas of focus. So I am coming to you from the science and technology team, where we work to advance foundational open access research in alternative proteins and creating a thriving research and training ecosystem around these game-changing fields. Our corporate engagement team partners with companies and investors around the globe to drive investment, accelerate innovation, and scale the supply chain. And our policy team advocates for fair policy and public investment for alternative proteins. And what I am really excited about is that even though I am coming from the US team, I have the privilege of working with a global team of experts across our affiliates in 6 other regions because we recognize the need for regional and local expertise to best match or best meet the needs of specific political climates, hubs of technical expertise, and natural resource production, and, of course, cultural foodways. So here we are in the Alt Protein Pipelines webinar, and the goal of this entire series is to share roadmaps for success in alternative protein training and education. Being an emerging field, there is still a relative lack of opportunities for people who want to build their careers in the field. And as with general trends in training and education, we know that empowering a robust workforce will require a multi-pronged approach. So throughout this series, we will highlight a broad array of real-world programs, and our goal is for this knowledge sharing to catalyze new program development and eventually kickstart the careers of future alternative protein luminaries. So we have focused previous webinars on hackathons and industry partnerships. So continue coming back to these webinars so you can expand your toolkit with these new pipeline options. Looking forward to today's webinar, I'm going to start by just sharing a few of the resources we have available that might be really relevant to you, assuming that you have any sort of investment into growing programs of your own. And then I will pass it over to the Brown Alt Protein Project team, followed by Dr. Daniel Harris. And then we'll go into a panel discussion and Q&A. So as a reminder, if you do have any questions for any of our panelists throughout this webinar, please put that in the Q&A box. That's just a lot easier for us to manage and make sure that we do respond accordingly. If you just want to connect with anybody, introduce yourself, that is something that you can do in the chat. So to highlight just a few of our resources, I had already mentioned our free online course, The Protein Transition, and this is a fantastic learning experience. I actually took it when I was onboarding for my current role, it really covers the basics of not just the cause areas and the benefits of alternative proteins, but the fundamental sciences of the 3 pillars of production that we focus on, being plant-based, fermentation-derived, and cultivated. We also have a very exciting, fairly new tool still that our colleagues at GFI APAC in the Asia Pacific region created. Our career pathways tool is really designed for students to navigate through different career options, see what their end job type, their job archetype might be based on their goals, and then all of the different steps and techniques and pieces of expertise they might need in order to get them there. It's a really powerful tool and also just beautifully designed and a great way to explore for a couple of hours. And finally, for today, we have our teaching library. And this is another treasure trove of open access materials for both educators and students as you are designing new training programs or even just engaging in self-paced learning. And I want to just kind of walk through what is available in our teaching library. So the person supporting this entire thing, Renee, has already been dropping the links to all of these resources. Thank you for that. I wasn't even noticing. But I just wanted to walk you through kind of different pieces and resources that you can find in our teaching library. And one of the things that I love about this resource is that we not only provide all of the resources that our community partners have shared with us, but we also give examples of how they can be stitched together in a real class format. And all of these are free and open to use. I'll go over the specifics of the Creative Commons license shortly. But going through here, you'll see that we have a lot of syllabi from alternative protein courses. And you'll see our most recent addition here from the Brown team that we will be highlighting today. But it is not always overview courses where you're kind of covering all aspects of the technology and cause areas, as you'll be hearing about today. We have some more specialized courses as well, whether that be specific to cellular agriculture or laboratory techniques. But as I had indicated, we also have examples of how a full course would be built from top to bottom. So you see, in conjunction with our colleagues at GFI Israel, they have every resource they used to produce a full alternative protein course with the syllabus, slide deck, and recorded lecture from every single week. So going down, then you can just kind of explore every single thing we have on offer. So here it is organized by the course it was built for. And then at the bottom, you also see, again, one of our newest additions, not just the syllabus, but the Brown team was kind enough to supply us with every single one of their assignments, homework, midterms, finals, and the rubrics. So again, you can be that much closer to building your own course or education pathway. You can also filter by specific technology pillars as well. So we have other opportunities here. One, if you're entering in conversations with your department and want to be able to highlight what areas of expertise would be needed to build a more comprehensive program like a major, we have already mapped those out for you. But the final things that I want to highlight, if we continue scrolling down, is, again, everything is free to use. The only restrictions on that are that we do require attribution, so please cite whoever originally built those materials. And if you are here, I have a feeling that you have some motivation to build programs of your own. Maybe you already have and are wanting to expand. So as you do that, please submit your own materials so that you can contribute to this library as well. Because we do really want this as a resource whose fundamental job is to lower the barrier to entry. And building these new courses can be a lot easier since people have done it before. And it will always, of course, require customization, but a lot of the groundwork has already been laid. So moving on, now it is my absolute privilege to pass it over to our panelists, and I will just provide a very brief introduction to our three speakers before passing it over to them. So in order from left to right, Luke has designed his own study track of sustainable international development at Brown. He is a current research assistant in the Harris Lab, working on a computational model of cultivated meat growth in a rocking bioreactor. and was recently selected as a Food for Thought Spark Fellow. He now serves as Vice President and Director of Education at the Alt Protein Project. Julia is a chemical engineering student currently on the high throughput team in the McDonald lab, building novel characterization methods and to assess rheological properties. She has contributed to what honestly seems like countless aligned projects, including as director of partnerships for that student-led Food for Thought Festival, campaign strategy intern for ProVeg International, and of course, as president of the Brown Alt Protein Project. And Dr. Daniel Harris is associate professor of engineering, having earned his PhD in mathematics from MIT and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill. Like many esteemed professors, honestly, his publication record speaks for itself, but I wanted to highlight that he is truly one of the exemplars of the category of faculty champion that we prize so strongly at GFI. His presence here today is, of course, a testament to his passion for the upcoming generation of scientists and leaders, and it's also evidenced by the recent Dedicated Faculty Award he received in 2023 and NSF's Career Award in 2024. So with that, I will pass it over to the Brown Alt Protein Project team to describe their initiative.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for the very kind introduction. So to get us started, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the history of education in the Brown Alt Protein Project and say that everything started on the winter of 2024 when we really wanted to create an opportunity for students who wanted to participate in the club but didn't feel like they knew that much about alternative proteins or just didn't feel empowered enough to be actually participating in the club and creating initiatives and discussions. So we started brainstorming with several other schools on creating an alternative protein fellowship. That would be an 8-week course where students would be able to explore the 3 different kinds of alternative proteins, as well as some policy and politics that are involved in making them mainstream. So we started brainstorming, and on the spring of 2024, we were able to launch the first edition of the fellowship that many students participated. A few of the students who participated did indeed become leaders in the Alternative Protein Project after. Luke is an example of that. And we think it was a very good initiative in making people feel more comfortable in the space and make them feel prepared to be leaders and make them feel prepared to join the club. So we, of course, did a second edition of the fellowship in the fall of 2024, but we also really wanted to get something that would make even more engagement and make people dedicate even more time to learning about alternative proteins. We got incredible feedback from the fellowship, and people always said in their responses that they really needed more time to talk about things, that they felt it was a little rushed, and that they needed more time to be going deeper into the contents. And then it was born the idea to create a 4-credit course. We wanted something where people would meet several times a week, every week throughout the semester, and not something that was just 8 weeks long. So we got started on planning how to launch a GISP, which is an Independent Study Project Program.
So throughout the rest of this presentation, we're going to share the process that we followed to create this course, and we'll also try to incorporate some advice for others who might be interested in doing the same or a similar process. So I will start with the beginning of the process that we followed, which was in the summer of 2024, when we knew that we wanted to create a course, but we didn't really know how to do it. And we started with what seemed to us like the most basic first step, which was just to do an internet search of what opportunities might exist at Brown to create a course. And actually searching something along the lines of student-led course at Brown pulls up the exact initiative that we did end up pursuing. So I would definitely recommend this as a first step. But if an internet search doesn't yield anything, I would also recommend reaching out to an organization focused on career advising, or I suppose curriculum advising. So at Brown, actually, if we could go to the next slide, we'll show the Curricular Resource Center at Brown, which does academic advising and educates students about Brown's open curriculum. And this was a very helpful resource for us as well. But through that internet search that we did, we found the Group Independent Study Project Program, or GISP. And so we wanted to learn more about this. It allows students to create and lead courses when those courses are not available in the regular offerings. And they give standard course credit, which was very exciting to us. So we were very interested in this initiative. We set up a meeting with the Curricular Resource Center to learn more and decided that it was a great path forward. I wanted to note that at some other schools, from the little bit of research that I've done, this might be called a directed study, or there may be other terminology for it, but at least at a few other schools, this type of program does exist. Um, but once we had this initial idea, we knew that we needed a few things. We needed a syllabus, a faculty sponsor, and interested students. And we really wondered what should be the first step for us to follow here. And we decided that the first thing to do was to define our purpose and our goals in this course overall, and then to sort of take preliminary steps toward the rest of these goals all together to holistically develop the course. And in the next few slides, we'll dive into the details of each of these steps that we took.
So to talk about purpose and team, this was definitely the first thing that we started with. It was just understanding what was the purpose of this course and what did we want to achieve with it. As I was mentioning in the history slide, we really wanted something that would give the students an entry point into alternative proteins. Alternative proteins is not in a part of most curriculums of courses at Brown. And for students who want to get started on this industry and learn more about the possibilities, they really have to study by themselves. And we wanted to facilitate and create an opportunity where students could meet in groups and talk about alternative proteins. That was the main purpose, and just giving them an entry point to something that Luke and I are so passionate about. And when it comes to team, that was also incredibly important. This GISP would not have been possible if we hadn't all the support of the team that we put together. And that it goes to say a huge thank you. And it's just amazing that we got a team of such passionate students in the Alternative Protein Project. So two things that I have to say are, one, if you are doing this at your school, definitely don't do it alone. It's so important to have a supporting team and other students who are just as passionate as you are, so you can make this into a reality. So definitely, first things first, start with purpose and start with a team.
So the next step that I want to highlight is our search for a faculty sponsor. This isn't necessarily to say that we did this before collecting student interest or creating a syllabus. We sort of developed all three of these goals together at the same time, but I'll first talk about the faculty sponsor. So we had a couple of different avenues that we could envision for how we might find a good faculty sponsor. One was to find someone who was academically aligned, so already teaching a course on a similar topic, maybe focused on food sustainability or food innovation. And also, we could look for someone who might be mission aligned, so someone who's passionate about alternative proteins and willing to really put in the energy to make the course a success. And we knew that it was possible, but not necessarily guaranteed that the first person that we would reach out to would say yes. So we wanted to make sure that we had a list of potential faculty sponsors. So Julia and I created this based on our own knowledge of the faculty at Brown, and also through doing some research, which I would definitely recommend looking into academically aligned or mission aligned professors, or even graduate students at your university. But I suppose it's been a bit spoiled already. If we go to the next slide, that we did have Dan Harris join us as our faculty sponsor, which we were very excited about. This was definitely the person we would have hoped would lead the course. He's very passionate about alternative proteins and is already our club advisor, and is also engaged in research relating to cultivated meat. So we were very thankful to have him on board.
We then moved on to gathering student interest. So all of that work would only be possible if students were actually interested in taking the course. So we sent out a form, just a very simple form for people to put in their name, email, and a reason why they wanted to participate in the course on our mailing list the semester before this one, so in the fall. We got 24 responses, which was very encouraging considering we could only have 25 students in this program. So literally we reached capacity and we were like, okay, there is interest. people really wanted to participate in this course. This is great. I also want to highlight this one quote of a student who said he wanted to participate and is actually participating right now. That said, among my friends, I'm known for devouring chicken thighs and pork loins at the Ratty. The Ratty is our main dining hall. Through this course, I hope to expand my palate and better understanding an important industry for the future. And I think it just goes to say, Luke and I are both vegan, but also we really expanded this course into several different students who are coming here from different interests and different points of view. And it's just very exciting to have 24 students who said they would be interested. And then also right now we do have 17 students who are actually enrolled and taking the course. We then moved on to putting together the syllabus. So that was a big challenge of understanding really what was going to be and go into the course. The first thing we did, if you go to the next slide, was just put down all the dates and the themes that we wanted to go through each week. So we got the calendar of the semester and we were like, okay, the calendar has 16 weeks. So we have 16 weeks of classes. There's a week for spring break. Let's just put all of that into one page and figure out what are the themes for every single week. We saw that we had 6 weeks before spring break, and we thought that would be the perfect opportunity to go through the reasons why alternative proteins are important, as well as each kind of alternative proteins. So we really started the course focused on the science, going through plant-based, fermentation, and cultivated. And then we decided to dedicate the second half of the course to something more policy and politics related. So if you go to the next slide, you can see it fully populated with also all the school breaks, the times that we didn't have class, and you can see in bright pink the classes that we decided would be for guest lecturers. This course, we were very lucky to have so much support from people in the industry and in academia who came all the way to Brown to give us lectures and share with us their expertise.
So I'll just discuss a little bit more of the particulars of our syllabus, because that was really the next step that we followed after taking the preliminary steps on each of these objectives. We then dove into really fully developing the syllabus and the curriculum. One of the main decisions we had to make early on was the structure of the course, which we decided to have it be 3 times a week for a 50-minute time slot. We thought this was going to allow students to stay engaged and consistently engaging with the material. And it also allowed us to discuss a lot of unique topics with a new topic each class, while still having enough time also for guest lectures roughly once a week. So once this was determined and we selected the daily course topics, we then focused on gathering all of the content for the course during our January break. And now we can take a look at the layout of the syllabus. We included kind of almost a timeline of the course, with each day having, well, first the week's topic and then the daily subtopics, and then the links to the readings for each class or information about any guest lecturers. And we also included homework assignments and the due dates in this sort of timeline strategy here. And this was actually modeled after a course that I had taken in the previous semester, and I found this structure to be very useful. So I would definitely recommend, if anyone's developing materials, to definitely rely on any previous experience from your own courses you've taken. And then, of course, to find all of these materials, which we can see in the next slide, is that we were able to use the GFI teaching library, which Nathan highlighted at the beginning of the webinar. This was very, very valuable to us. There's a lot of existing coursework, syllabi, things like this, and we were able to find a lot of content for the course using this resource. And now, also, as Nathan mentioned, our syllabus is present on there, which is very exciting for us. So now another aspect of the syllabus that I'll discuss a little bit more is the assignments that we had, which are also available on the teaching library. We broke this up into 4 main categories. The first just being a daily attendance and participation feedback form, which was very valuable to us because it served 2 purposes. It allowed us to track everyone's attendance, which we had as a priority for the course. We weren't necessarily trying to make all of the assignments really, really rigorous and difficult, but more we're trying to make sure that everyone was engaging with the course and constantly getting something out of it. So this form allowed us to track that and also allowed us to collect any feedback to make improvements throughout the course. The next thing was weekly homework assignments, which were designed to take a couple of hours a week and just refresh and maybe dive a little bit deeper into the topic that was covered that week. And then we had a midterm and a final project, and both of those actually had several different options that students could follow, because we really wanted to allow them to explore their own interests. And be able to learn from each other's unique interests as well. So for the midterm, students were able to interview experts either in the alternative protein field or outside of that field. And then they also had the opportunity to do a scientific deep dive on one of the topics that was covered in the first half of the course, and learn a bit more about that. They also had the opportunity to create an alternative protein ad for a either real or a fictional company, which was a lot of fun as well. And then for the final project, there were 4 different characters that students formed groups around and could follow the process either of an entrepreneur trying to create a company in alternative proteins from scratch. They could also act as a scientist and propose research related to alternative proteins. They could be a consultant and help an existing alternative protein company, or be a politician and advocate for alternative proteins in policy. So this is sort of an overview of the assignments that we had, really trying to allow a lot of exploration and consistent engagement with alternative proteins content.
And then we had the guest lecturers. What we try to do for this course is have at least one guest lecturer join us every week. And I'm very happy to say that as a result, we got 12 experts to come and talk to us and share their expertise with the class. And I just want to highlight how collaborative the alternative protein community is. I want to say something that was very surprising, that all the invites that we sent, we got 0 no's. Everybody that we invited to speak at the class said yes. And that just goes to say that this is such an amazing community where people really want everybody to learn and everybody to get engaged with alternative proteins. So I definitely want to tell everybody else that if you want to create a course and you say, I know this part very well, but there is this one thing that I'm very anxious about, or that I don't know that much, or I don't know where to get started, definitely reach out to people. There are experts, there are university professors, there are CEOs, there are people who own businesses, people who are doing amazing work, who will be glad to talk to you. And Luke and I included, please send us a message if you have questions, if you want to collaborate in any way, because this community and the people involved in the space are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. So just want to highlight the guest speakers and how this process is very collaborative. And it was so collaborative for us, so it should be for you as well. Going now to the results. So this is a screenshot in the far right of our class in the official class schedule. And this is the description of the course. This was a big milestone moment for us, just seeing the course on Courses at Brown, which is the website that we use to sign up for classes. And then also this is a picture of us in our classroom. I want to highlight here that we had every single classroom sitting down in circles. So all the classes were very much discussion based and everybody was being able to add to the discussions. We chose to do discussion instead of lecture, which was very nice. And this is on the other picture, people sitting down for a guest lecturer. As I said, we had 17 students join the course, which is very exciting. And if we go to the next slide, we can see a few of the quotes of what people shared about the class so far. So one person said that this is a very good overview of the industry and that it was able to fit into their own personal interest while within alternative proteins. This was very important to us because we knew we had students coming from all backgrounds. We have people who are doing engineering, we have people who are doing computer science, political science, biochemistry, biology, and we really wanted everybody to know that they do have a space in this field. And I think we did a pretty good job at that. Somebody else said that they can now confidently speak about alternative proteins and share with others. This was also something really big for us because we didn't want to just impact someone, but we wanted to be an impact multiplier. So whenever we are teaching people, we're also giving them the power to teach other people. So we know that every student who has been impacted by this class will be able to go home or sit at a restaurant and say, oh, I'm ordering this because this is actually a really cool alternative protein. And let me tell you about this new technology. And lastly, we got someone to say that they learned so much and that they came into this class with barely any knowledge, which is also something good to be doing an introductory course on. We didn't have to go so deep into the science or really explain what a cell culture is or explain the bioprocessing that goes into fermentation or just how difficult it is to have all the technologies for plant-based proteins. We really just wanted to give everybody an introduction and make it a comfortable and safe space for someone who knew nothing about this, but is now able to do so much with it.
All right, thank you for that wonderful overview by the students. I just wanted to take a few minutes and not to take much away from what the students have done, but highlight a little bit about my connection with the project, and then give a little bit of context on the history of the alternative protein and connections with GFI at Brown generally, which precedes Luke and Julia joining Brown a little bit. So my background's in mechanical engineering and applied math, and I run a lab in the School of Engineering at Brown University, and broadly themed my research is in fluid dynamics, so the motion of drops, bubbles, flow over airfoils, that sort of thing, anywhere where fluids play an important role within engineering and nature. So I myself wondered how that might connect with some personal interests, because as mentioned earlier, I'm a big animal lover and a vegan for about 10 years. The picture on the right, probably a bit distracting, but that's me with Jupiter the pig at River Haven Sanctuary, where me and my family volunteer regularly to give back to our community. And so that had been a kind of a separate stream and values within my life. But then you'll see in the middle here kind of where that overlaps with my professional work. And so over the past 6 years or so, initially starting with some financial support from GFI, we've been looking at the fluid mechanics of bioreactors, and in particular in the context of cultivated meat, with some interesting scientific challenges there, in particular, as many of you may know or may not know, in looking at scaling up production to make these types of things more affordable. The physics can change dramatically, and so we're looking at how different types of bioreactors can be used to fill that need, going from the laboratory scale to real production. And there's a lot of interesting fluid mechanics, transport phenomena that we figured out in that process. And in particular, our lab, and again, it was mentioned, Luke is one of the key members of our lab working on this space as well. We are bringing simulation toolkits, developing new simulation toolkits, working with experimental collaborators, both at the moment at Tufts and Boston College to kind of validate our models. But developing these toolkits open source, again, with the spirit of GFI's resources overlapping with that, to the benefit the broader community within this space. And so we're continuing adding functionality, continuing working with experimentalists to validate, and have received support from both nonprofits like GFI, as well as some preliminary support from NSF for some of the computational resources we need to solve these simulations. And we did some brief consulting in industry as well with Merck, who was interested in stepping into this space as well. So if we go on to the next slide. So I just wanted to give again a little bit of context of the history here, and more importantly, I think than the specifics of the connections at Brown here, is what I want to really emphasize is how student-driven this has been from literally day one at Brown. So again, you've seen these beautiful course put together by Luke and Julia, but the whole effort dates back perhaps to this email and an interaction I had with a student here. This goes back to 2018, so this was really a year after I joined at Brown, and a student that was a member of one of our animal rights clubs here. We had connected and reached out, in particular looking at getting involved in research in my lab. I had no connections with alternative protein professionally, but of course, as I mentioned, interest personally in the space. So I highlighted a couple of things here, and but again, she prompted this in reaching out. I don't know if there's an area, this is an area you know much about, but I'm interested in ultimately working on cellular agriculture of plant-based meat products. I would especially interested in any research that's relevant in these areas. And then later on, although I'm still unsure if a mechanical engineer has a role in clean meat, so contacted one of the researchers at GFI that helped us understand where our expertise might actually fit into this space and hopefully contribute to the broader community, perhaps from a different perspective than the large majority of people working in the cultivated meat space. So that's been quite exciting, but again, not on my radar, pointed out by this student, and kind of sat there for a little bit. I had been doing some work with biomedical engineers, doing some kind of computational modeling for different device design, but again, more relevant to medicine and certainly to food. And so if you go to the next slide. So this was almost a year later. The student didn't give up. So she pointed out, she was actually working in my lab at that time on one of these biomedical problems, developing these types of lab on a chip devices. And so these are sometimes alternatives to animal testing where you can test drugs and that sort of thing on small chips. So there's some clear overlap there. And so mentioned, she recognized the overlap with our lab, that these lab on a chip devices are potentially useful for clean meat. And here's what GFI put in their newsletter. And so if you click to the next one, was this. And so highlighted a research grant and research that was done by this group in Serbia that had been using microfluidics and things we've been looking at in very different contexts in my lab for this space. And so if you click one more, so I was quite excited about that. And to make not that long of a story short, I reached out to Ivana at this institute just to learn more. She was eager to get on a call. And very quickly, we learned that the skill set that our lab was bringing that was somewhat lacking within her particular project of computational modeling could really benefit their effort. And so within really a few weeks, she invited us to join a follow-up grant in this space. And so that's where we lead to this. So we did receive our first grant from GFI that helped us get started in this space. Again, trickling back to that student email, but without the support of GFI, we would certainly not have been able to enter the space. Since then, I mentioned a number of other funding opportunities, including a follow-up grant from GFI to look at some of these rocking bioreactors, which is a more of a novel type of bioreactor being explored for this space. And Luke's one of the key developers in that effort. Click once more. A couple years later, GFI encouraged us, as we had built this connection through our research program, to consider the alternative protein projects that we hadn't heard about before. So I approached the same student that was working in my lab. She was very interested. And so helped get that off the ground in a kind of small capacity initially. And then Julia, when she joined several years ago, really took that to the next level. And if you go one more, and that kind of brings us to our discussion today, where we have this, the first course, 4-credit course at Brown for alternative proteins. And it's really, I'll highlight some of my responsibilities in the course, but it really is student driven and very much would not have been possible without them. So again, and before we move to the Q&A, some of my responsibilities. So it's a very non-traditional class because it is student-led. It's something special we have at Brown, but as Luke mentioned, many institutions have similar mechanisms. I am responsible for all the grading, so the students can evaluate themselves, but in the end, I'm grading all the assignments and keeping track of that, looking at academic integrity and all the the other things that come along with running a course. I get to attend, which I think is a privilege. So I've been coming to a lot of these wonderful guest lectures, as well as the Food for Thought Festival, which was integrated as part of a kind of a field trip within the course. So that's been a great opportunity to expand my own network and connections and learn about very different things than the science as well. So looking at the economics, the policy aspects, things that aren't necessarily at the forefront of my knowledge or research. There's always, with every class, kind of an endless list of miscellaneous administrative tasks. So reserving rooms at the right time, conflicts when rooms are reserved at the same time we've run into, dealing with reimbursements for various guest speakers and that sort of thing. And then keeping an eye on, students that may have different accessibility needs or accommodations. keeping those in confidence and making sure we address those appropriately. And then the last thing I'll mention was securing funding as well. So the GIFts program here and any of the independent studies at Brown don't come with any funding. However, faculty have the opportunity to apply for course funding to develop new initiatives for undergraduate education here. And that's almost exclusively for traditional courses that have been already implemented. But we went ahead and with the support of, in the vision of Julia and Luke, requested some of that funding as part of this effort. I think they were very confused because this had never been done before, but they were very gracious. And I think the groundwork that the students had built and the motivation that was clearly there allowed them to help support some of the expenses. And those predominantly went to supporting our guest speaker expenses. Some were on Zoom, so that was not particularly relevant. But in terms of reimbursing travel and trying to have more in-person speakers, primarily going towards that. And so we were able to, in a kind of more unconventional way, get some funding to support some of the vision of Julia and Luke. So with that, I believe that's about it.
Well, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the three of you for sharing not only the choices that you made, but kind of why you made those choices and the path that you took along to get there. So now we will be transitioning to the panel discussion section of this webinar. As a reminder for everyone in the audience, if you have any questions that you would like us to address, please put that in the Q&A box so that we can make sure to answer those when it becomes relevant. So in this transition, I did kind of want to zoom out a little bit. Just thinking about the fact, Julia and Luke, you had said that you kind of started with the overall objectives of the course. And of course, this came from the growth out of the fellowship program as well. So I wanted to start with why the GISP in the first place. You know, it makes sense as one of the most prominent student-led mechanisms that you had. But what benefit did you see specifically going in that direction that you think you would not have been able to meet in something like an alternative protein module in a course that already existed, or just continuing the fellowship?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I can definitely speak to that. So we definitely had the initial kind of spark of like, we want to expand the educational opportunities at offered at Brown. So compared to just continuing with the fellowship, we thought that developing a course would allow students to have more incentive to participate. So someone who might not be willing necessarily to do this 8-week program as an extracurricular. Once it's being offered as a course and they can get credit for it, they might be more interested in participating. And then they might also be able to prioritize it more and put more time into it for the same reason. In terms of that versus incorporating it into an existing course, we thought that having a standalone course would really be a stronger stepping stone towards ingraining alternative proteins into the ecosystem of Brown's education. So having an existing course can really be a launch pad, hopefully, to expanding it into potentially a perennial course or even something bigger down the line, like a major or a certificate, something like that. But we thought that having this experience of a standalone course and showing that there is direct interest by the students in this topic could be very valuable going forward and expanding education further.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate how you're acknowledging that in many ways, this course kind of seems like the culmination of all of your efforts. You had the fellowship, you built this, but also it can be a milestone along a longer journey towards a major. And Dan, I know you had mentioned this a little bit, especially in your closing, about how you think that this course contributed to the educational ecosystem in Brown as a whole. But I'd love to know just kind of your relationship with teaching in the department in general. Like what in terms of what you have control over, of course. But what specifically in the balance of the yeses that motivated you, and what I think is equally as important is like the absence of reasons to say no to this initiative, whether it be about time commitment, academic flexibility, or anything else?
Yeah, certainly that's a really important question. And I mean, when Julia and Luke approached me with this idea, I originally was quite hesitant, knowing what it takes to to teach a course, and knowing the demand on any faculty member's time was going to be challenging. But of course, I didn't say no immediately, just because I have such deep passion for this, and I know I've known Julia and Luke for a while, that they're just so dedicated to this. So they so we had a meeting, sat down together, they explained it to me, and the resources that they had already created, even though we're still in the kind of review stage, were remarkable in terms of how professional they were, how well thought out it was. Again, we have this special mechanism for student-led courses, but that also has a relatively rigorous review process in terms of which is not up to me. It's a totally independent thing to make sure that it meets the standards of a course at Brown, gets all, hits all the check marks. And so after understanding my role a bit more and what the students had done, building from the resources that were available at GFI, made it for a much easier yes. I don't get credit for teaching this like I do my other courses, at least at the level of a group independent study. So in some sense, it really is a volunteer effort. At this level, of course, the goal is to eventually be able to promote this to a full-time regular course where things would change. But that can be really hard. And that's why because I have very little control over what I am assigned to teach, and I was hired to teach in a specific field. This is a new research direction for me and a new field, I mean, in general. So I think this is was a really good compromise where it was a relatively light lift for me, but what the things I could contribute to make the course successful, are things that maybe Luke and Julia had less experience with or didn't have access to. And so I think it made for a really great partnership in that sense. But I think starting, early and often making those connections with the relevant faculty members is really important, because if you come a month before, even a year before, teaching assignments are relatively fixed. And so depending on the mechanism at, your university, it might look different, but starting that relationship, I think early is really important, which gave me confidence that it would be a successful course, and that it would be a relatively light lift compared to running my own course.
Thank you. I think you brought up a lot of really important considerations here. And to lean more into a couple of them, I was interested in getting your experience and just perspective on how the Brown ecosystem was situated to let this happen. And I think this can be some of the most useful, like, insider institutional knowledge for allowing other people to do something similar, because obviously we've discussed the GISP structure that allows for it, but you've also talked about the quite rigorous but collaborative review process. And then also the fact that within this ecosystem, Dan, you don't have credit given to you for doing this. So I would love to know, especially Julia and Luke, from your perspective, like what it was about the structure that really facilitated and made things easier for you. So that could be the structure of the GISP. It could just be like the disposition of the people you were working with, whatever you found most useful to move those steps along.
I can take on that. I definitely want to highlight how Brown is a university that really allows for programs such as this one to exist. Brown has a long history of encouraging students to be intellectual entrepreneurs and to really take their education into their own hands. The specific program we're here talking about, the GISP, has existed since 1966, when the first GISP was created with a group of 18 faculty and 50 students, I think. I might be wrong, but this just goes to say that Brown has a long history of really putting the education in the hand of the students. That also goes for our open curriculum, etc. So I do think that the culture of the university was an important factor in just the existing structure of a GISP program, of something that is an independent study. But I also want to say that a lot of liberal colleges, liberal arts colleges, and many other universities in the United States have been taking similar steps and have similar programs, and that allow students to follow their interests and follow their passions to create something that they might not find in the structures of the normal classrooms. So as a short answer, I do think that the most important thing to make this initiative as streamlined as it was the existence of this program that has existed for such a long time and has so much structure and so many people working on it that made this possible for us to create a whole syllabus in a course in less than a semester, but also to say that the culture of the university itself and the students that go here also contribute a lot to that.
Before I dive into the next topic, was there anything, Luke or Dan, you had wanted to add to that topic?
Yeah, I think Brown being a primarily liberal arts institution, in a very open place, makes her a very interesting mindset of the students. I mean, I found that even within the technical engineering courses compared to places I've been previously, very worldly mindset, not simply focused on, one very specific piece of technology. And so I think that was one of the attractive things about this course. Well, two things. One, it's remarkable the breadth of students that were, joined this course, from engineering to all over campus. That's quite rare, at least, for the courses that I typically teach. And I think most courses at this level. But then also just the range of topics, and I mean, these go hand in hand, the range of topics that are able to be covered within the course spans a lot of different interests across campus. And I think, I mentioned I don't get formal credit for this, but I've learned a lot through the process and also made connections through the guest speakers and that sort of stuff that are of professional value to me as well, moving forward. And it's been really interesting experience just to think outside of my own circle as well, to hear from a venture capitalist or someone that, I never would have thought about talking to before in my line of work, but just learning about the challenges of science generally, of course, within the context of this space, but how something goes from the lab to scale and how many different aspects have to be solved, from policy to consumer research. It's not just about getting the equations right. There's so much more that goes into it. And so not necessarily that's, shifting fields for me, but appreciation of a kind of holistic capacity. I have not had that experience with other research projects. But through the last semester, through this course and various programs that I've been to, like the Food for Thought Festival, Innovation Day at Tufts, it's really a close-knit community of people doing very different things for one goal. And I think that fits really closely within the Brown ethos, and has made the course successful, and hopefully will continue to be so.
I'm really glad that you said that. And of course, it's not just in alternative proteins where interdisciplinarity is becoming quite a buzzword, just in education more broadly. And you were speaking so well to the range of topics you could provide, which of course requires a range of expertise, which is really hard to do on your own. So I would love to kind of transition into discussing how you incorporated these pre-existing resources into your course. And it sounded like, as you were first designing the course, that you really kind of started with the objectives of what you wanted the students to be able to learn, develop, and just kind of take away from the course. So I would love to know kind of your process of working from those objectives, how you sought out those different resources. If you have specific examples, that would be fantastic to share as well.
I can start and then maybe others can add on. But in terms of the research versus or resource versus objective mindset, it was definitely a little bit of both. It was definitely objective first in that we sort of defined the overall objective for the course and then found the resources that would best kind of convey the learning goals that we were trying to achieve. But also, we were able to define this objective and knew that we could be successful with this objective because of the resources that already existed in the teaching library and elsewhere throughout our experience. And so we were definitely able to have this in mind as we were developing the objective of the course as well. And yeah, the teaching library was very valuable. And yeah, maybe if Julia wanted to add to that, yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing also was reaching out to the Curricular Resource Center and understanding how they are able to provide us with syllabus, example of syllabus, and also example of what a good enough midterm project really is. So one thing that we had to decide was, at least for me, also being an engineering student, most of the courses I've taken, they're very exam heavy. So understanding what it is like to create something that is enough of an assignment, but it's not an exam, since we didn't want the class to be very memorization based or just heavy on exams. The Curricular Resource Center was a huge help in understanding what it takes to create a midterm project or what it takes to create a final project, and also understanding with the several examples that they gave us of what is a good grading rubric and how can we provide the faculty sponsor with enough details on what we want from the course so that they know exactly how to grade it and how to take on all of that. Luke and I obviously never created a course before, so being able to do this for the first time definitely required a lot of help. Part of it we got from Dan, but other parts was definitely from the Curricular Resource Center that I would recommend anyone who's in this position to reach out, even if you're only doing maybe something that the students are not necessarily gaining course credit for. But if you have a Curricular Resource Center or if you have a curricular office that is responsible for checking the curriculum and the syllabus of the courses at your university, just asking them, I want to create this fellowship. It's not necessarily for course credit, but I want this to be a good resource for the students. How do I do that? I'm sure they will have so many resources and so much advice.
I'm glad that you highlighted that. Something that, if you are on the call and you have experience like that, you probably know that you need both the expertise of the specific content and course material and just basic teaching, pedagogy, andragogy, to make sure that you are getting that course content across effectively. So thank you for highlighting that. I'd like to kind of supplement that question with kind of a call to action to everybody who might be watching this, in terms of as you were building out your course or even just thinking into the next iteration of this, what gaps did you find in the resources that are publicly available that would be helpful to add to our library and other just kind of collections of resources?
I can say that as well. I think one thing we were definitely missing were assignment options. So we did add all of our homework assignments and midterm and final project to the library right now, but that was not something that we found very easily. Having the creativity to come up with assignments and good homework questions for the students to really reflect on everything they have been learning was definitely a meaningful experience, but also an experience where we felt a little anxious because we didn't know if those were the exact questions that we wanted the students to be answering, if those were the questions that would make them really think critically about the material. So I would say definitely assignments, midterms, projects, and things that create the opportunities we wanted to create for the students in terms of assignments. The other thing I thought was missing was lab components and experiments that we could give to the students as something more hands-on. So we understand that we don't have a bioprocessing facility where the students would go and be able to do any alternative protein, but maybe having more experiments that could be that could give the students a little better understanding of fermentation, or maybe what it takes to extract coloring, or maybe to create food coloring, or any type of experiment that would give them a lab component to this course would have been very enriching, but it was not something that we were able to easily find in the level that we were looking for, which is an introductory college level class that didn't have access to that much laboratory equipment.
Yeah, and I think just building off that briefly in the last two questions, I think this initiative, which GFI is putting forward in terms of what I think of almost like open source education. I work a lot with open source hardware and software in my lab with a similar goal. And I found in particular, when I started teaching, even teaching calculus, it's been around for 400 years. It's like, why should we be writing lectures from scratch, for instance, right? For calculus. And I think this has already advanced, further than some of that. And so I think it's good to remember that it will be imperfect, but that sharing your resources, it's, a very organic system, similar to like open source, software and that sort of thing, where it will continue to grow. And this feedback's really important. And that as developers come in with different expertise, we can create something that's much better than what we can do individually on our own. So I was really impressed with this resource, but I think that's an important paradigm I hope education can move into more broadly, because I think we can be more efficient, but also more effective by drawing on particular, the strengths of others to create something even bigger. And so I was impressed with the resource that GFI had. And again, I don't think the fact that there were things missing, that will always be the case, but now Julia and Luke have developed them. There'll still be things missing and there'll still be improvements, but that's growth, I think, and that's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, I'm glad that you highlighted that, and let that be a call to action to all of you. If you are developing laboratory protocols, please continue adding them and sharing them. I will say, as someone who has a couple of years in the classroom, it feels like you're not doing your job if you aren't designing your own lectures. And I completely understand that impulse, but it is, as we are all learning together as education is developing as a profession and as an ecosystem, it depends on how you define your role as a teacher, as an educator, as a professor. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of acknowledge that and work within what we had. And speaking of the collaborative nature, I was seeing some of the questions come in, so I think I'm actually just going to weave that into our panel discussion, because people were asking questions very related to where I was hoping this conversation would go anyways. So first, talking about the way that you structured the course, both for practical reasons and I would imagine just to engage students even more, you really leaned on the expertise of a lot of different guest speakers, and you had highlighted that previously. So I would love if you could share any best practices on getting those yeses, especially if they are cold outreach. Is it a matter of just appealing to their better natures and asking them to pay it forward? Is it a matter of providing them some sort of tangible benefit, like access to an early talent pool? Or how did you kind of incentivize and motivate those yeses?
Yeah. To talk about the guest speakers, it was actually very surprising, as I said in the introduction, how we really did not get any negative responses, and everybody that we invited to speak at the class said yes. Part of it was what the work that I've been building on creating relationships between people in the industry, as I've been president of the Alternative Protein Project for the past 2 years. So all the people that we have interacted with or engaged with in several capacities, be it by doing a food tasting at Brown or by inviting them or seeing them. Some people that we invited was because we met them when we went to visit Tufts. Other people was because we did tastings of their products at various activities or events in the All-Protein Project. So I think one thing I would recommend is understanding that the relationships you're building and the networks that you're forming, they will come in handy down the line, especially if you're making a course and you're inviting someone to speak. But also the process of getting them to say yes, it's the usual thing, creating a nice, polite email and sending them an invitation, asking to be flexible with the dates. We really wanted all the guest lecturers to be on Friday, but we had to open it up and say it was okay for people to come on Monday or on Wednesday, although we were very strict about the time of the lecture because that was the time slot that we had with all the students available. And I think it's a mix of being welcoming and being very grateful. So telling them how much this will add to the course, also telling them how much work the students put in. A few of the emails that I sent them, I shared the lectures that we had, I shared all the discussions, I shared the student feedback, and I made a very pretty email saying, this is everything that we are learning, and this is how you can contribute, and this is how you can add so much to everything that the students have seen in the past week. And I think it's hard to say no and to that, and also knowing how the community is so collaborative and so welcoming. Everybody was very happy to be here, and people even came in person when they were close by, although some of them were on Zoom, but everything was just so exciting, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I think that's the second time that the idea of kind of just like demonstrating the engagement of the students can be so powerful in getting those yeses. I know, Dan, you had said the fact that they came with a very professional proposal made it a lot easier to say yes, and then same with your guest speakers as well. So really doing that prep work, but showing that it's not just any student. These are motivated students that will put in the work, that will be contributing actively, can go such a long way. And again,
Yeah.
from my experience in the classroom, yeah, definitely makes it much more enjoyable to be on the other side when you have an engaged student body.
I also want to add that
please.
all the guest speakers, as we emailed them saying thank you for coming, they all said they would be promptly available to mentor or to help any students who wanted to go into a career and do things similar as they were doing in their own jobs. So for the speakers that we brought in, it was really such incredible people that said, here's my email, please reach out to me and please talk to me if you have any questions about my job or about the career path that I decided to follow or how I'm being impactful in the job that I chose to do. And we did also really get a variety of speakers from different perspectives of the industry and from different perspectives of academia. So I think it's really cool that probably all the students in the class were able to look up to someone and be like, this is a job that I see myself doing. This is actually something that is really cool. And we did get some people reaching out to us and saying, can you please send me their email again? I really want to talk to them. So it's really about paying it forward and making sure that people are also making the connections that we have made and advancing their careers and thinking about the impact that they can do with their lives.
I know you started with this, but I continue to see more evidence for it of just how collaborative and supportive this entire industry really is, an ecosystem, whether you are in academia or industry, that continues to surprise me because, frankly, I'm not used to that in the professional sphere. But it also speaks to something that we prize at GFI, the idea of a tiered mentor program. Because at this point, Julia and Luke very well are well positioned to be mentors to students now coming in with the student attendees of the course and others in the group that are more junior than them. And of course, there are plenty of mentorship opportunities that they could take advantage of with professionals in the field as well. So I would imagine for the vast majority of people watching this webinar, you are probably in a position to be both mentor and mentee, and don't discount one or the other. Before we do, like, at least start wrapping up, I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about just like course logistics. So there are two related questions from the audience. One of which there might not be a direct analog. So if this is your question, you're welcome to clarify in the chat. This is from someone thinking in the perspective of the UK university ecosystem, asking about the level and credit rating that the GISP course had. So I would imagine this might be number of credit hours and like the equivalent of a 101 versus 201 type of level. If you'd be willing to share how that shook out in the final form.
Yeah, I can talk about this. In fact, Brown kind of has what I understand is a little bit less conventional of a course credit system, which is that in general, each course is just one course is one credit. So a standard course at Brown is one credit, and that corresponds to 180 hours of like dedicated time towards that class over the course of the semester. It's obviously not always exact because not every class can take the exact same amount of time, but that's generally how things work, with some classes being half a credit. But GISP classes are always worth one credit, which is the same as any other course at Brown. I think this corresponds to like a 4 credit course or at other schools. And there was a second part of the question about developing it to become a major. And this is definitely more of a long-term goal for us. I think a lot of energy this semester has just gone into making this course this semester run as well as possible. But we do have our alt protein project chapter has an education department, and that's going to be a priority of ours is to develop this course first into a either annual or every 2 years offering as a standard course, and then potentially developing further from there.
One other thing to mention on that as well is Brown has perhaps another more unique opportunity, but what we call independent concentration, where students can actually design. Again, it goes through a very, very rigorous review process, but they can design their own major essentially. And so in certain cases, so for instance, Luke is a design engineering major. That program's only been around for 2 or 3 years now, but it originated from many students designing these independent concentrations centered around a common theme. And so that could be another possible next step is looking at that as a mechanism to continue to show dedication and support that would then give enough credence to creating an actual concentration. But that's a paradigm that has been successful recently, and again, is a kind of student-led, student demand, and then becomes, eventually recognized and answered by the faculty and administration.
Yeah, and I just hear everybody continuing to kind of come back to the idea of what we describe in the Alt Protein Project and at GFI as just the idea of ecosystem mapping. And working within the structures that already exist. Because obviously you have the GISP, so that made a lot of sense. But the fact that that is a very well-established system for decades, and that was far beyond what I was expecting. And then also you have the history of the student-designed concentrations into a dedicated area of study. So you can lean into that existing system. I mean, you did kind of mention the idea of next steps and how that would be happening, but we had a specific question also about just ensuring longevity of this project, whether that just be the next structure that this takes in a formalized course that is not a one-off structure like the GISP, and just the people behind it, because unfortunately, and we were talking about this before, you will eventually graduate, which makes me very sad, but also very proud. So what are your plans for ensuring that it will last beyond your tenure here?
I think I can speak a little bit to that. Ensuring longevity has been one of our priorities in the Alt Protein project, and I'm very happy to say that we have been finding students who are freshmen or sophomore or even we are juniors right now, so we still do have another year, and finding freshmen and sophomore who are as passionate as we are has been very rewarding because we can see and train them to know everything that we know. We have also been very thorough in making sure we have notes of everything that we have been doing, and we have very specific step-by-step on how to do things, which is also something that GFI and the All Protein Project coordinators, shout out to Asia for being awesome, have been encouraging us to do. So I do see how staff changing jobs or a lower number of students might happen, but it's really about, even if you hit a really rough year where there's only 1 or even 0 students who are keeping up the All Protein Project at that university, hopefully there will be a new batch of students and new passionate students who will come and say, I'm ready to join again. I'm ready to reboot this. It's part of what I did when I joined the All Protein Project. It had really died down after the pandemic at Brown, and just being able to reach out to Asia and say, I really want the All Protein Project to work again at Brown. I really want this to be a very alive chapter. And having all the resources and the documents that the people before me put together was really so helpful, because I was able to not reinvent the wheel, but just get started from where they left off.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. One particular goal that we have going forward is to broadly in the club, but specifically for this initiative, get some engagement from graduate students because so the GISP program specifically, which can be run by undergraduate students, we aren't able to repeat this course. So this basically is one and done in this particular format, or at least through this particular program. But going forward, having the support of a graduate student who was interested in taking on the course and leading it would be another potential opportunity for this course to be offered as a teaching fellow program, which is something else that we know exists at Brown and may exist elsewhere. So having graduate students involved will allow us to progress the course potentially and have it be offered as more of a standard offering. And this could potentially build to having a faculty member take it on. But yeah, I think that's a next objective of the education department of our alt protein project is, and even other departments as well, is getting more engagement from graduate students as well.
And the other thing I was going to mention is we're very fortunate to be in New England and with a very high density of educational institutions and technology. And so, for instance, Tufts has really led the way in a lot of ways in creating this type of programming. I believe they have a concentration or a minor now as well. But looking towards, if we're looking at low enrollment and that sort of stuff, looking towards also partnering with other institutions locally becomes more possible given our location. And so that's another way we could continue to expand this effort and really satisfy the needs and training for these students at Brown.
I think all of those are really important things to emphasize. And Dan, to what you just said, something that you kind of had already built in, but just to make sure that you'll get credit for it, is not just partnering with local institutions, but the power of just cross-listing a given course in multiple departments can bring in a whole new batch of students, especially when it is an overview course such as this one, because students in different departments often don't even look at the listings that are not relevant to their major, but if you then are able to cross-list it, then it's on many more people's radar. And as we learned, they had a lot of success in getting students in that had no conception of the field of alternative proteins before this. And I just kind of want to reemphasize what y'all said about the fact that you were able to revive the Brown Alt Protein Project, which of course we are endlessly grateful for. But for those of you who do have concerns about longevity, because obviously students graduate, something that I would really encourage you to do, even if you do not have a dedicated and defined successor to follow in your stead as soon as you graduate, make that archive anyways. put all of your resources, all of your institutional knowledge down in writing so that even if there is a couple of years gap, that next person, the Julia in whatever ecosystem you are in, can pick it up much easier than if they have to kind of, chart their own course and do a little digging. So as we transition, oh, I see one more, Luke, that you had wanted to talk through. I will actually let you take this one then.
Sure. I guess I just wanted to note a couple of the decisions that we needed to make in terms of the structure of the course, because I think there are a lot of these types of questions that students might be faced with as they're creating a course. So one of the initial decisions was whether to make this course lecture-based or more discussion-based. And I wouldn't say it was necessarily a very hard decision for us, but I just wanted to share how we came to that. We really wanted this course to be as collaborative and exploratory as possible. And so this lent itself much better towards a discussion-based structure of the class. But also, creating a course that was based around lectures would have been a lot more work for Julia and I, and definitely was something that was not particularly comfortable for us. At least I know personally, I didn't, especially at the start of the semester, feel confident enough in all of the subject matter to be giving lectures on it, especially considering that Julia and I in this GISP structure are technically considered, well, not technically, we are students in the course, as well as the fact that we're leading it. So this was a primary reason that we wanted a discussion-based course as well. I think it's a lot more accessible to students to start a course and not have to feel like they have to write out 20 lectures about different topics related to alternative proteins. But we were able to incorporate a little bit of that with the guest lectures and bring in people who are experts and be able to share about their specific angles that they're able to approach alternative proteins with. So we thought this was a pretty valuable structure. And for similar reasons of having the course be very collaborative and very exploratory, we decided to have no exams and instead to do projects for the midterm and final, and then also to do weekly homeworks that allowed lots of different options as opposed to maybe like assigning papers throughout the semester. So really these decisions came back to our overarching goals of how we wanted this course to run, but I think also helped make it a bit more accessible to students who might not feel like alternative protein experts necessarily to still be able to lead some sort of initiative like this.
Absolutely. And I think that use of accessibility in this frame makes a lot of sense because, if you have a background in biology, you can much more readily grasp a lot of the fundamental science, but there are students that don't. And obviously, we need people beyond the life sciences to engage in this field, and making it accessible, lowering that perceived barrier to entry is such a huge value add to our ecosystem. So we are rounding towards the close of our webinar. So I wanted to give each of you the chance to maybe provide, these two might be the same, might be different, the primary lesson learned throughout this initiative, and one piece of advice that you would leave the audience with, if you have any sound bites that you have ready for us.
I can start. So I think the main lesson, or one of certainly the primary lessons that I'm taking away from this, is just how relevant alternative proteins are to such a wide range of fields and so many different types of students. It's been really valuable to see students in this course coming from lots of different backgrounds. Yes, we have students studying biology and chemistry and that sort of thing that might be more traditionally associated with alternative proteins, but we also have political science students, international relations, cognitive science, computer science students, really coming from a wide range of backgrounds and all being able to bring their unique perspectives to the course. And it's really made it a very enriching environment. And I think it just shows that there are so many different angles to come to alternative proteins with, and to not be necessarily discouraged by one's own personal background, that there are still ways to engage with this field. And in terms of a piece of advice, I would say we have mentioned it already, but having a strong team around you when developing a course, I've personally found very, very valuable. I don't necessarily want to dissuade someone who is like just on their own and thinking, okay, I can do this by myself, but really think about having multiple people working on this project with you, even as simple as like there were a couple of times throughout the semester where either Julia or I wasn't able to make it to class, and that didn't mean we had to just cancel class. Like we are students, we're gonna have a conflict every now and then, but having a group of people working on this with you, I think can be very valuable in making the project as successful as possible.
And I think if I were to give a piece of advice, it's just for people to create the things they wish it existed. So if you are sitting down and thinking, oh, I wish I could take a alternative proteins class. I wish I could build this into my graduation or build this into my academic journey, do it. And it takes courage, and it takes a little bit of preparation, and also it takes a really good team. But I do want to say that things are possible, and they might not be possible in the exact same ways, but the GIST program that was created at Brown in 1966 was created by a student. And there's nothing different from you and that student. You're both able to create something that you wish existed. And there is an entire community of people who are here to support you and to support this initiative, myself included. And we are just happy to see all of those new things becoming true and being able to inspire more and more students into the future of food.
And yeah, similarly, I think I've been throughout the research aspects of the educational aspects. Again, we've hit on this a few points, but just reaching out for support when times are tough or you're uncertain. There's resources out there, but a very supportive community, much more so than any other field that I've worked in, at least within my experience. So definitely, if there's uncertainties or maybe not the same mechanism as we've discussed today, I think any of us would be happy to follow up and help guide you and identify the right faculty or whoever might be to lead that forward. But I guess the last thing I'll mention was, I'm glad I've been able to contribute this, but all these efforts along the way, hopefully it has been very clear in this webinar, have been student driven and student initiated. So I'm glad to be able to support them, and I'm very proud of that and what they've done. But I've talked to a number of other researchers in this space, and the student enthusiasm is unlike any other. I mean, we have so many pressing problems that we're faced with. We could go on and on about that, but the student initiative and from the research education is really unlike many others. I've talked to a lot of faculty about this, so I think the power of the students, and there's a will, there's a way, I think really fits in here. So just want to make sure I left with that, and that I'm glad to support them, but this is really all Luke and Julia and the number of students that have really made this possible at Brown over the years.
I can think of no better way to end that. Obviously, in my position, I fully endorse the idea that the student engagement and student power in this field, in this mission that we are sharing, is like nothing else. And as Julia said, it takes courage. There is also support. And part of that includes us at GFI. It's literally what we are here for. So as we close, again, please remember that we have resources available to you. I myself can be a resource. We have what we discussed earlier in the teaching library and elsewhere. But also for those researchers who are looking to build your network, we have the Alternative Protein Researcher Directory, as well as a couple other communities too. So to close out, I would also love to hear any feedback that you would like to give. We have a feedback form, as well as if you want to reach me directly by email. I would love to hear different topics, other speakers that you would like to hear highlighted in the next iteration of this webinar series. So to close out, on behalf of myself, the Alt Protein Project team, and GFI as a whole, I want to thank everybody for attending and contributing to our shared mission towards a more just, sustainable, and secure protein supply. Thanks, everyone.